1 week season. NFL Edge Audio.
Cardinals at Browns. Kickoff Sunday, November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern, over-under 37.5. Game Overview by High-Low. Clayton Tune is expected to draw the start for the Cardinals, with Kyler Murray not yet ready and Josh Dobbs traded to the Vikings. David Njoku picked up an ankle injury in Week 8 and did not practice on Wednesday. Kyler Murray was a full participant in practice on Wednesday and Thursday, but is reportedly going to require another week before he draws the start for the Cardinals. Deshaun Watson was limited Wednesday and Thursday as he works his shoulder back into game shape. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was second in line for quarterback snaps behind Watson in Thursday's practice, but the team still lists P.J. Walker as the direct backup. Donovan Peoples-Jones was dealt at the deadline. James Conner is in the final week of his IR stint, meaning another week of Amari DeMarcado and Keontae Ingram leading the backfield. How Arizona will try to win. The Cardinals have been reduced to a shell of the roster that started the season, and they already enter Week 9 with the worst record in the league. Furthermore, the schematic mastery that had suppressed offensive production against them during the first month of the season has fully worn off, with teams able to move the football seemingly at will of late. The Cardinals are all the way down at 26th in the league in total offense allowed, 355.8 yards per game, and have allowed 26.6 points per game through 8 weeks, ranked 27th. They have played with pace, a fourth-ranked 27.2 seconds per play, and have the highest rush rate in the league over expectation. Expect more of the same for as long as they are able, considering the rookie quarterback and difficult matchup. Amari DeMarcado split time with Keontae Ingram in the first game without Conner, took on an elite workload in the second game without Conner, an 80% snap rate, and then settled back into a typical lead-back snap rate in the third game without Conner at 55%. DeMarcado is clearly the leader of the backfield in the absence of Conner, but carries a wide range of outcomes as far as how involved we expect him to be, and the matchup is far from ideal against a Cleveland defense allowing 4.0 yards per carry and ceding just 1.21 yards before contact this season. DeMarcado is not a zero in the pass game, but he has more than one target in just one game of the previous 3 played without Conner. This is a fairly imposing spot, any way you slice it. The Cardinals shifted to a heavier rate of 11 personnel in their first game without tight end Zach Ertz in Week 8, which could also be attributable to the negative game environment they encountered against a solid Ravens team. Second-year tight end Trey McBride saw a solid 82% snap rate in that game, joining Marquise Brown and Michael Wilson as near every down pass catchers. Rondale Moore continues to play almost exclusively from the slot in a short area role, while Greg Dortch was inactive for the first time this season in Week 8. That left Zach Pascal, Elijah Higgins, and Andre Basellia to split the remaining crumbs of leftover snaps amongst the pass catchers. The Browns play the highest rate of man coverage alignments on defense this season at 46.5%, against which only Brown carries a targets per route run rate over just 14% this season, at 33.9%. Per PFF, Brown ranks 7th in fantasy points per route run, 0.72, against man coverage and holds the 6th highest receiving grade against that primary coverage, 89.2. Wilson has performed well against zone this season, but carries a putrid 3.8% target rate against man. How Cleveland will try to win. The Browns have been able to control most of their games this season with their defense, a unit allowing just 19.9 points and the fewest total yards, 260, per contest. That said, they have allowed their last 3 opponents, the 49ers, Colts, and Seahawks, to amass 344.3 yards per game as the league seems to have begun to figure out their man-heavy and blitz-heavy defense. For comparison, 344.3 yards per game would rank 25th in the league if extrapolated to the whole season. Yeah, nonsensical extrapolation alert, but take it at face value as a pure comparison of recent performance. Cleveland has been in the top 5 in RROE for most of the year, leading the league in rush attempts per game at 34. Regardless of who is under center for the Browns in Week 9, expect them to lean on the ground game and their defense for as long as they are able, which should serve to mute the overall game environment here. Jerome Ford went into Week 8 with a questionable designation after picking up an ankle injury in Week 7. Kareem Hunt started last week's game and served as the lead back through the first half, backed up by Pierre Strong in a change of pace role. Ford then either made a miraculous recovery at the break or pulled a Monty Python, "I'm not dead yet," because he was the featured back in the second frame. The confusing utilization of backs led to all three seeing 10 or more running back opportunities in Week 8. It takes a bit of faith, but I see Ford as the lead back if healthy enough, likely backed up by Hunt in the change of pace and goal line role, and Strong as the semi-emergency back. Either way, there are significant ambiguities with this situation that led to a rather wide range of outcomes for all parties. The matchup on the ground is one of the biggest mismatches of the week against a Cardinals defense allowing 4.4 yards per carry and 11 rushing scores through 8 games played. The Browns have utilized near league average rates of 11 and 12 personnel, which has kept Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, and David Njoku in what are close to every down roles. The team dealt DPJ at the trade deadline, leaving rookie wide receiver Cedric Tillman as the player most likely to enter the starting lineup in his place. He is the player whose skill set most directly aligns with the departing Peoples-Jones, but Marquise Goodwin is also on hand to work a downfield role should the team choose to go that route. Goodwin is one of the fastest players in the league and has been utilized in a downfield role in previous stops throughout his career, so the safe bet could be to use Godwin in the vertical role. Either way, Cooper, Moore, and Njoku, assuming he is active after a DNP on Wednesday, are the only pass catchers we can have confidence in to play heavy snap rates. The Cardinals blitz at below average rates and have generated pressure at the third lowest rate in the league this season, which should provide Cleveland pass catchers the time to let their routes develop fully. Arizona has forced a middling 7.6-yard defensive ADOT this season, induced via the 7th highest zone utilization. Cooper leads the team in targets per route run rate at 22.2% and fantasy points per route run rate at 0.33 against zone coverage this season, but both marks rank outside the top 50 at the position against that primary coverage. Likeliest game flow. It is likely we see the Browns assert control over this game in short order, particularly considering the fact that we can expect a rookie quarterback to draw his first NFL start for the Cardinals. Both teams want to control the game on the ground for as long as possible, with the Browns set up well to do so, and the Cardinals likely to be forced to a more aggressive aerial stance as the game moves on. That should return a rather muted game environment and additional opportunities for the Cleveland defense to apply pressure in the backfield as the game progresses, with increased opportunities for the Cleveland backfield to rack up volume throughout. There isn't anything that jumps off the page considering the confusing timeshare in the Browns' backfield, but this could be a situation to leverage a bit of that uncertainty if ownership remains held in check due to the ambiguities. The lone Cardinal worthy of consideration at what is highly likely to be minuscule ownership is Hollywood Brown, who has run nuts against man coverage this season. Rams at Packers. Kickoff Sunday, November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern, over-under 38.5. Game overview by Hilo. Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford suffered a UCL injury to his throwing thumb in Week 8 and did not practice to start the week. I am no expert on UCL injuries, so I'll have to defer to actual doctors here. Most Twitter docs, I know, have Stafford as likely out until Week 11. The Rams tried to sign John Wolford off the Buccaneers practice squad, who then turned them down and was signed to the active roster in Tampa Bay. That whole situation was practice squad comic gold. Los Angeles then signed some dude named Dresser Wynn because the only other quarterback on the roster or practice squad was backup Brett Rippon. The Rams did sign running back Darrell Henderson to the active roster after 2 straight games as a game day call-up. The Packers had just 5 players limited in practice on Wednesday and nobody listed as DNP, but are still struggling with injuries on the defensive side of the ball, with Darnell Savage and Eric Stokes on injured reserve. How Los Angeles will try to win. The Rams rank near middle of the pack in seconds per play at 28.4, but we know them to be a team that would prefer to play slow and methodical. They started the season in the top 10 in pass rate over expectation, but 3 consecutive strong rush rate over expectation showings against the Cardinals, Steelers, and Cowboys have them near middle of the pack. Considering the matchup, the state of the team, and the status of quarterback Matthew Stafford, I think it's likely we see a 3rd straight game with an emphasis on the ground game against a Packers team that has struggled with opposing rushing attacks under defensive coordinator Joe Barry. Brett Rippon has 3 starts in his professional career, all of which came as a member of the Broncos. Last season, he had 2 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions, and fumbles, 1 lost in 4 appearances, 2 of which were starts. At minimum, Kyren Williams will miss another 2 games, which leaves the backfield in the hands of Darrell Henderson, who was signed to the active roster this week, and Royce Freeman. Myles Gaskin was active in Week 8 for the first time as a member of the Rams, but didn't see any offensive snaps. Freeman has been a better back from an efficiency standpoint, running laps around Henderson the Plotter, I'm pretty sure he dressed up as a Viking for Halloween, and took over the backfield opportunities in the second half of the team's Week 8 loss to the Cowboys. The Rams were down 33-9 at the half, so that could be a case of getting the better pass catching back on the field due to game environment, but Henderson is a fine pass blocker in his own right, which made the usage confusing to me. Either way, both backs shared the field at a near even split after Henderson saw almost 60% of the offensive snaps in Week 7. I would expect the Rams to start the game with Henderson in the bruiser role while Freeman handles the change of pace role and obvious passing downs, with the situation fluidly dependent on game environment. The matchup is mostly a net positive on paper, Rams 6th in run DVOA against the Packers' 24th ranked run DVOA, middling 1.32 net yards before contact, 4.1 yards per attempt for the Packers, which should allow the Rams to continue trying to eat up clock and field position through sustained and methodical drives. The Rams primarily run from 11 personnel with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Tutu Atwell, and Tyler Higbee all in near every down roles. Atwell and Higbee have combined to see just 20 targets over the previous 3 games with a single game high of just 7 looks, leaving the bulk of the passing usage for Kupp and Puka, injury attorneys at law. Both players have also been the primary pass catchers for the Rams against zone coverage, which the Packers run at the 6th highest rate in the league. Surprisingly enough, Puka holds the highest targets per route run rate for the Rams against zone coverage this season at 30% to 23.7% for Kupp, and a laughable 15.2% for Tutu. The prevent nature of the Green Bay defense should lend itself well for the Rams to find success moving the ball through short to intermediate passing to Kupp and Puka. The quarterback situation means drives will likely have to be strung together instead of many deep shots. On that note, the Packers rank 9th in the league in YAC allowed due to their soft coverages and have forced opponents to a shallow 6.2 ADOT. That said, nothing in this matchup should prevent Puka and Kupp from seeing solid efficiency in this spot. How Green Bay will try to win. As we covered in depth on the Slate podcast last week, the Packers have been a veritable disaster this season. Many point to Jordan Love as the primary reason, but I place the blame squarely on the head coach, Matt LaFleur. If we break down an NFL game into the different areas as they relate to preparation, the first quarter and a half would be the game plan section. The next quarter and a half would be the game management section, where coaches make their adjustments, and the final quarter is the desperation section. The Green Bay Packers went into Week 8 having scored just 24 points in the first half and managed to score just 3 points in the first half of their game against the Vikings. 27 points in the first half through 7 games played is not a quarterback problem. That, my friends, is a coaching problem. Yes, Love has not been great, or good even, and the Packers have struggled through numerous injuries to key players on the offensive side of the ball, but these are all things that the coaching staff know as they draw up their game plan for the coming week. Said again for dramatic emphasis, the Packers averaged 3.86 points per first half through 7 games played. LaFleur can only hide behind the, well, I don't know if Jordan Love is the future in Green Bay excuse for so long. Because the offense has been so poor in the first half this season, it's difficult to read too much into their offensive design through the first half of the season, aside from pointing to a typically slow pace of play under LaFleur's tutelage and pass rate over expectation values that have historically been around league average. The backfield has also been unfortunate considering the injury troubles of the aging Aaron Jones, who has played just 1 game that he started and finished this season, Week 8. He left the team's Week 1 contest in the third quarter with a hamstring injury, returned in Week 4 only to aggravate the injury, then returned again in Week 7 to a modest 36% snap rate. It wasn't until Week 8 that he worked his way back into an even split in the backfield, which could theoretically increase now that he appears fully healthy for the first time since preseason. That's important because one of the most inefficient backs in the league has been thrust into the featured role out of the backfield for Green Bay up to this point in the season. A.J. Dillon's 3.1 yards per carry ranks 59th. His 3.9 yards per touch ranks 48th. His 14.7% juke rate ranks 41st. He has one breakaway run through 7 games, good for a 48th ranked 1.2% breakaway run rate, and he has a 21.2% stuffed run rate on the back of the 15th most stuffed runs this season. The Green Bay offensive line has also not done these backs any favors, blocking to just 1.28 yards before contact. They are great in pass protection though, blocking to just a 22% pressure rate allowed. The matchup yields a poor 1.31 yards before contact against a Rams defense holding opponents to 4.1 yards per carry. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Luke Musgrave are the only Green Bay pass catchers to see steady, near every down roles in this offense, while Jalen Reed, Jones, Dillon, and Josiah DeGuara have fluid roles dependent on game environment. The Packers have preferred to run from 12 personnel at elevated rates in neutral to positive game script, while more or less being forced into heavier rates of 11 personnel when playing from behind, which, in case you haven't noticed, has been quite frequent this season. As we've discussed, Jordan Love has been a near-average quarterback when kept clean, and one of the worst quarterbacks in the league when under pressure. The good news is that the Packers' offensive line has been one of the best units in the league in pass protection, and the Rams have generated pressure at a well below average 18.7% clip this season. Los Angeles has also faced the 5th deepest defensive ADOT this year, which aligns with how we'd expect Green Bay to attack them through the air. Love holds the league's deepest intended air yards per pass attempt, so it's typically of the downfield variety when they pass. The Vikings were able to restrict the downfield nature of this pass offense in Week 8, but they did so via intricate blitz packages and pressure in the backfield, something Raheem Morris is far less likely to do in this spot. Likeliest game flow. Nothing from last week to this week should change drastically for the Packers, considering they came out of their bye week and put up a combined 3 points in the first half against the Broncos and the Vikings. In other words, nothing is pointing to anything changing from a game planning perspective, considering we've seen the early game struggles continue beyond the team's bye week against two defenses that are non-elite. Yes, the Broncos are probably better than they performed to start the season, and the Vikings have been burned at times if teams figure out how to attack the soft spots behind their heavy blitz rates, but these are not elite defensive units. As such, it should be the Rams as the driving force behind this game environment, at least in the first half. That is not the best news, considering they will likely be playing with either a starting quarterback who could have trouble gripping the football — again, I see Stafford is highly unlikely to play this week — or a backup quarterback with minimal NFL action to his name. That should return a rather muted overall game environment here, with neither team likely to go out of their way to dial up the aggression in this particular spot. Below average total number of plays, slow pace of play, methodical drives, and few chances of scoring are likely here.
The Commanders at the Patriots. Kickoff Sunday, November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern, with an over-under of 41. Game Overview by Pappy. This game features one of the highest tempo teams in the league, Patriots, and one of the pass-heaviest teams in the league, Commanders. No one on either side of the ball is priced above $6,000 on DraftKings. 5'8", 6th-round rookie Demario Douglas is currently projected to serve as the Patriots' #1 wide receiver. The Commanders traded away defensive ends Montez Sweat and Chase Young, primarily hurting their pass rush, but their run defense as well. The Commanders' passing game has been boom or bust this year, creating a wide range of DFS outcomes for this game. The most likely scenario is a low-scoring game with a lot of inefficient plays, but it is possible this game becomes more exciting than the total would indicate. How Washington will try to win. The 3-5 Commanders limp into Week 9 fresh off division losses against the Eagles and Giants. Ron Rivera's team started the season with 2 wins, but has gone 1-5 since, only beating the Falcons in a close game. The mood of management was on display this week when they traded 2 former first-round picks in Sweat and Young. The Commanders are still publicly saying they care about this season, but freeing cap space, $90 million available, and stockpiling draft picks, 3 in the top 50, tips their hand that 2023 has become a throwaway season. The Commanders' management might not be trying to win, but the coaching staff's jobs are always on the line, which means you can bet Ron Rivera will still be trying to keep his team believing that this year matters. The Commanders quietly have the highest pass play rate in the league, 72%, under new offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. They have the second highest pass rate over expectation, only a tick behind the Chiefs. The Commanders are throwing because passing is their new offensive philosophy, not because they are typically chasing points in negative game scripts. The Commanders' O-line hasn't been great this year, 19th ranked unit per PFF, but they got back guard Chris Paul, no, not that one, and center Tyler Larson last week against the Eagles. They did a relatively good job against Philly's fierce rush, only allowing 14 pressures on 55 dropbacks. There is reason to believe the Commanders' O-line is trending up as a pass-protecting unit. The Patriots' defense has been good against the run, 7th in DVOA, but has seen its pass defense, 18th in DVOA, slip after losing star rookie cornerback Christian Gonzalez. The Patriots prefer to lean on man coverage, which makes losing a shutdown corner hurt even more. The Commanders were going to pass anyway, but the Patriots being weaker through the air sets up perfectly for another pass-heavy game plan. Expect Bieniemy to stick with what he knows, which is slinging the rock all over the field. How New England will try to win. Once feared, Bill Belichick's 2-6 Patriots crawl into Week 9 having scored the fewest points, 118, and sporting the worst point differential, -90, in the AFC. The only team worse in both metrics is the hapless Giants. These are not your father's Patriots. New England looks lost on offense. They're 24th in the league in PROE, but 13th in pass rate, which shows they want to run but are constantly chasing points. Their O-line has been one of their worst during Belichick's tenure. They've been bad overall, 23rd ranked unit per PFF, and even their best player, Trent Brown, gave up pressure on 12.1% of pass plays last week. Bill O'Brien always felt like a familiar face rather than an answer at offensive coordinator. How long will it take before Josh McDaniels is back in town after his latest failed attempt at coaching without Tom Brady? The truth is, it's not going to matter who is calling the plays. There has never been anything special about McDaniels, O'Brien, Belichick, or any other failed Patriots assistant coach. Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel, I'm looking at you. There has only ever been something special about Brady. The Commanders have been solid against the run, 6th in DVOA, but lit on fire through the air, 30th in DVOA. The Commanders have been one of the biggest pass funnels in the league. Even though the loss of Sweat and Young will weaken their run defense, it should still be considered above average. The departure of Sweat Young will be really felt in the pass rush, which should make their back end even more vulnerable. The Patriots' pass offense hasn't been good, and their wide receiver room just lost their best player for the season, Kendrick Bourne, further making this a weakness-on-weakness matchup. One area the Patriots have been consistent in is pace. They've played at warp speed, second fastest pace overall, and have been notably quicker at home, playing at the fastest speed in the league inside Gillette Stadium. Expect the Patriots to come out with tempo while still having enough know-how on their coaching staff to lean more pass-heavy than usual. Likeliest game flow. This game has a lowish total, 40.5, with the Patriots installed as moderate, -3.5 home favorites. This is a weakness-on-weakness matchup when the Pats have the ball. The Patriots' offense has been poor in all metrics and just lost their best wide receiver for the year. The Commanders' defense has been decimated through the air and just traded away 2 of its best players. The Commanders' offense has been more middle of the road than bad, but they get the Pats' defense, which has also been respectable. This type of setup creates a game where the most likely outcome is both offenses struggle. The Pats because they aren't very good, and the Commanders because they're on the road in a difficult matchup. The most likely outcome is a low-scoring, mistake-filled game that is determined by who manages not to lose the game. It's worth noting that weakness-on-weakness matchups have a lot of variance. There is a chance the Pats' offense finds success, which feeds into the already extreme pass-leading Commanders' play style, and this game ends up going substantially over its total. That outcome is certainly possible, but it is not the most likely scenario. The Bears at the Saints. Kickoff Sunday, November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern, with an over-under of 41. Game Overview by Hilo. The Bears held a Wednesday walkthrough after playing Sunday Night Football in Week 8. On Wednesday, Justin Fields remained a DNP on the team's projected injury report. The Saints are relatively healthy at the moment, with just linebacker Ty Summers and wide receiver Lynn Bowden Jr. listed as DNP Wednesday, neither of whom are starters. Chicago somewhat confusingly dealt a second-round pick to the Commanders for defensive end Montez Sweat at the trade deadline Tuesday. Both teams averaged a middling 21.4 points per game this year. How Chicago will try to win. The Bears have to be playing for the future at this point, particularly considering they currently have a greater than 50% chance to have 2 of the top 5 picks in the 2024 NFL Draft. That makes the recent trade with the Commanders for defensive end Montez Sweat that much more confusing. Made even more head-scratching by the post-trade reports that the Bears didn't have a solid plan in place to extend the elite pass rusher after his contract expires at the end of the 2023 season. Either way, Chicago currently sits at a 2-6 record, 1 game ahead of the NFL worst Cardinals and 0.5 games ahead of the Panthers. Chicago owns Carolina's 2024 first. As for how this team is built this year, things haven't been as terrible as their record would lead you to believe. Matt Eberflus took over defensive play calling this offseason and has this team performing extremely well against the run. If I told you that the Bears currently lead the league in yards allowed per rush and have surrendered just 4 rushing scores all season, you'd likely call me a liar, before checking for yourself and getting owned. They have, however, been absolutely gashed through the air to the tune of a 6.9 net yards per pass attempt value, 3rd worst, and the 2nd most touchdowns allowed, likely hamstrung by an inability to generate pressure in the backfield. 2nd lowest pressure rate this season at 16.6%, ahead of only the Broncos, and that comes with a slightly above average 24.5% blitz rate. From a top-level offensive perspective, the Bears play with a modest pace, 19th ranked 28.7 seconds per play, with extreme rush rates, 3rd highest rush rate over expectation. Poor offensive efficiency has held the Bears to 62.9 plays per game, which has, in turn, kept their rushes per game to 29.1. A season after leading the league with 5.4 yards per rush attempt, the Bears rank 5th at 4.6 behind an offensive line blocking to 1.57 yards before contact, 3rd best in the league. Rookie quarterback Tyson Bagent has just 7 carries through 2 starts, leaving a larger share of the rush attempts to the backfield compared to starts with Justin Fields under center. Even so, the return to the lineup of rookie running back Rashawn Johnson forced a 3-way split in the backfield in Week 8, reducing Deonta Foreman's snap rate to just 32%. Veteran journeyman Darrington Evans has seen between 27 and 48% snap rates since Khalil Herbert was placed on injured reserve. The matchup on the ground is far from ideal against a New Orleans defense holding opponents to just 1.19 yards before contact, 4.3 yards per carry, and just 4 rushing scores through the first half of the season. The Bears have utilized 12 personnel at a slightly above average 29% since Herbert went down with an injury in Week 5, with Cole Kmet playing a near every down role and Robert Tonyan mixing in with Mercedes Lewis in a shared role. DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney operate as near every down wide receivers, with rookie Tyler Scott stepping into a standard slot snap rate of around 60% during the most recent 3-game stretch. The Bears average 30.3 pass attempts per game on the season, 28th in the league, which has increased slightly with Bagent under center to 33.0 over the previous 2 games. The Saints run man coverage at the 4th highest rate in the league, 32.7%. Against which only Moore and Kmet have an above-average receiving grade. Moore leads the team with a 20.3% targets per route run rate against man. Not exactly elite, but not terrible at the same time. How New Orleans will try to win. Derek Carr has been pressured on 34% of his dropbacks this season. His completion rate drops from 70.1% when kept clean to 50.6% when under pressure. He has an above-average 74.4 passing grade, PFF, when kept clean versus a 48.8 grade under pressure. He's tossed 7 of his 8 touchdowns when kept clean. Carr is not immune to pressure in New Orleans, which is important in this matchup against a team generating pressure at the 2nd lowest rate in the league, ahead of only Denver. Even though Carr has passed for 300 yards or more in 4 of 8 games this season, he has multiple touchdown passes in just 2 games and has not yet thrown for 3 or more touchdowns in a game this season. Many of this team's struggles have come in the red zone, having scored a touchdown on just 42.86% of their red zone trips this season. That said, they broke out of that slump against the Colts in Week 7, scoring on 75% of their red zone trips on their way to their best offensive output of the season, 38 points scored. Overall, the Saints run an up-tempo offense, 6th ranked 27.3 seconds per play, with moderate pass rates, middle-of-pack pass rate over expectation, and a robust 38 pass attempts per game. Jamal Williams returned from injury 2 weeks ago to 22 and 23% snap rates in a subdued role in the offense. It is still unclear whether that is by design or necessity due to his extended absence, but that role has minimal upside. Rookie Kendre Miller has played single-digit offensive snaps in every game where there were 2 healthy running backs active ahead of him on the depth chart this season, playing double-digit snaps only in games where 2 of Kamara, Williams, and Tony Jones, no longer with the team, missed. Tight end Taysom Hill's role in the offense has changed with the win this season, most heavily influenced by the available personnel and matchup. After 5 consecutive weeks of single-digit fantasy returns, he has put up 12.3 DK points, or more in 3 straight games. Finally, Alvin Kamara has settled into a tight workload in the past 3 games, with between 17 and 19 carries in each game, and a pass game involvement that is most correlated to game environment, seeing everything from 3 targets in a blowout win over the Patriots in Week 5 to 14 targets twice in losses to the pass funnel defenses of the Jaguars and Buccaneers. As covered above, the pure rushing matchup is actually one of the worst on-paper matchups in the league against a Chicago defense more equipped to erase the run than they are to handle the pass. Derek Carr leads the league in intended air yards behind a solid 8.8 IAYPA, 3rd deepest in the league. The biggest problem has been efficiency, as his CAYPA sits at a paltry 3.7. His on-target throw rate ranks just 22nd, 73.8%, and his poor throw rate ranks 6th, 18.8%, both of which are most heavily influenced by pressure. The Bears have been largely unable to generate pressure this season and play zone at a top 10 rate, which should filter most of the pass volume through Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, the 2 pass catchers who have performed the best against zone this season. Michael Thomas will be on the field as a primary pass catcher, but his targets per route run rate drops from 34.5% against man to 15.4% against zone this season. Rookie wide receiver A.T. Perry was active for the first time this season in Week 8, while tight end Juwan Johnson returned from a stint on injured reserve to a 61% snap rate after serving as the primary tight end to start the season, which held Shaheed to just 27% of the offensive snaps in Week 8, his lowest of the season. He still caught all 3 targets for 153 yards and a score, but the reduction in snaps was stark to say the least. Finally, after 2 consecutive games of 50 pass attempts or more, Carr threw the football only 27 times in a game the team controlled throughout against the Colts a week ago. Likeliest game flow. It is likeliest we see this game played to an inefficient field position battle unless one of 2 things happens. The Saints continue their newfound successes in the red zone, 75% red zone touchdown rate against the Colts, but a season-long average under 50%. Or the Bears push the Saints on the scoreboard. Neither scenario has a greater than average chance of coming to fruition, but would mark the only 2 ways this game environment delves into meaningful territory in fantasy land. In other words, 8 pass catchers and 3 running backs saw snaps for the Saints in Week 8, with only Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Foster Moreau, and Juwan Johnson seeing more than 60% of the offensive snaps, while no player saw more than a 74% snap rate, with the team now closer to healthy than they have been at any point in the season so far. A matchup against the worst red zone defense in the league, 78.26% red zone touchdown rate allowed, could lead to a clearer path to one of those outlier scenarios developing here, which would lead to a game environment where the Saints are allowed to manage the game through modest pass rates, defensive successes, and forcing the Bears to the air at inflated rates.
Enjoying the game breakdowns? Go to oneweekseason.com and become a subscriber to gain access to in-depth analysis, strategy interpretations, and more to help you bring your daily fantasy football game to the next level.
The Cowboys at the Eagles. Kickoff Sunday, November 5th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern, with an over-under of 47. Game Overview by Mike Johnson. The Eagles have looked dominant for most of this season, while the Cowboys have had some struggles, but a Dallas win here would have these teams tied up atop the NFC. Both teams have played a relatively modest strength of schedule, and this will be one of the toughest tests for both of them. Dallas finally opened up their play calling and were more aggressive through the air coming out of their Week 7 bye. Jalen Hurts had a season low in rushing attempts and yards in Week 8 as he continues to recover from an apparent minor knee injury. The ability of the Dallas offense to apply pressure on the Eagles will be key in determining the game script. How Dallas will try to win. The Cowboys came out of their Week 7 bye throwing haymakers, jumping out to a 33-3 first-half lead over the Rams before coasting to a 43-20 victory. After a tumultuous first 6 weeks that featured an embarrassing 28-16 loss to the Cardinals and a humiliating 42-10 dominant performance by the 49ers, the Cowboys still entered their bye with a 4-2 record, thanks in large part to a relatively easy schedule. The list of starting quarterbacks the Cowboys have faced this season: Daniel Jones, win. Zach Wilson, win. Josh Dobbs, loss. Mac Jones, win. Brock Purdy, loss. Justin Herbert, win. Matthew Stafford, win, but he was injured mid-game. While quarterback play across the NFL is not necessarily at a high point, you can see how they have picked on some weak links en route to their current 5-2 record. Nonetheless, a win this week would put them on pace with the Eagles and continue to build off the momentum they created with last week's convincing win over the Rams. Head coach Mike McCarthy rightfully took a lot of heat for his conservative and run-heavy play calling to start the season, but came out of their Week 7 bye firing. Dallas called 10 pass plays on their game-opening touchdown drive and continued to be aggressive throughout the first half, ending on a 5-play, 63-yard touchdown drive that was entirely composed of pass plays and gave the Cowboys a 33-3 lead. There were a few Rams turnovers and mishaps that helped lead to the game being out of hand so quickly, but the Dallas offense had a noticeably different feel to it than we had seen before their bye week. CeeDee Lamb was finally featured, and he responded with a career-best game, showing he can be the true alpha wide receiver this team needs. This week's matchup with the Eagles and their top-ranked run defense points to another spot where Dallas should be leaning heavily on Dak Prescott. The Cowboys tried to be a run-first team to start the season, but entered Week 9 ranked 23rd in rushing offense DVOA. The Eagles have allowed season-best performances from Kirk Cousins, Sam Howell, and Mac Jones this season. The script absolutely calls for Dallas to spread the field and throw the football once again this week. Star running back Tony Pollard has struggled in a more traditional role this season, but the Cowboys may need to find ways to get him involved in the passing game in space, which suits his skill set better anyway, as the Eagles are sure to be keyed in on Lamb. The Eagles have a top 5 pass rush, and Dallas has had inconsistent offensive line play this season, furthering the chances that Pollard and the tight ends are featured on shorter passing game concepts. Ultimately, the Cowboys' defense has proven to be most effective when playing with a lead, and Dallas will almost certainly have to approach this game with an aggressive mindset if they want to jump out ahead of the current top team in the NFL. How Philadelphia will try to win. For as impressive as the Eagles have been this season, and how much hype and publicity they receive, they still have a lot to prove. While they sit atop the NFL standings as the only one-loss team in the league, their 7-1 record features only one victory over a team with a winning record, a 31-17 Week 7 win over the Dolphins. It's really no fault of their own. They can't control who is on their schedule. But for all the Super Bowl hype that teams get at this point in the season, we really don't know that much about how they will match up and handle the top teams in the league. The Eagles have narrow victories over the Patriots and Commanders, twice, along with an ugly loss to the Jets on their resume. Over their last 5 games, Philadelphia has not led by more than one score through 3 quarters of any game. Again, wins are wins, but it does show the Eagles are not as dominant as their record may indicate. A huge divisional matchup against a team with momentum and playmakers on both sides of the ball will be a big test as the Eagles head into their bye week with a chance to put some distance between themselves and the rest of the division. The Eagles' offense as a whole is relatively run-heavy, passing on only 57.9% of their plays. But a lot of that has to do with game script. When adjusting for situation, the Eagles rank 8th in the NFL in pass rate over expectation. They have shown that they are happy to ride their dominant offensive line, which ranks first in PFF run blocking grade, to grind out the clock and coast to victories when their opponents are unable to keep up with them. They have also shown that they are more than happy to let Jalen Hurts air it out when necessary, as evidenced in last week's victory over the Commanders when Hurts threw 38 passes for 4 touchdowns and 319 passing yards. Through 8 weeks, Hurts has attempted at least 37 passes on 5 occasions. Last year, Hurts reached that number only 2 times in 15 games. A.J. Brown is on a dominant tear, setting the NFL record for consecutive games with at least 125 receiving yards last week. Devonta Smith has taken a step back this season as Brown asserted his alpha status, but he is coming off a big game and had a career-best game against the Cowboys last season. Meanwhile, Dallas Goedert and running back DeAndre Swift have provided consistent receiving threats to complement Brown and Smith. The Eagles have a lot of weapons, including Hurts, who is currently nursing a knee injury and had his lowest rushing total of the season against Washington. The Dallas defense is very good on paper, but has feasted on some below-average quarterbacks and offenses. They can certainly perform at a very high level, but they are likely to struggle with the combination of the elite running attack that the Eagles' offensive line provides and the talented playmakers they must account for in the secondary. Likeliest game flow. The Cowboys' home-road splits have been significant this season. They are 3-0 in their home games so far this season, with a point differential of plus 78, an average margin of victory of 26 points. Meanwhile, they are 2-2 on the road with a negative 1 point differential despite a season-opening 40-point victory over the Giants in New York. The Eagles, meanwhile, have scored 30-plus points in all 3 of their home games so far this season and have lost only 3 home games in the last 24 months. Obviously, anything can happen in a 1-week sample, but the greater context of both of these teams points to a situation where the Eagles are most likely to control this game. Dallas plays at the league's 3rd slowest pace of play, 29.9 seconds per snap, ahead of only San Francisco and Tennessee, while the Eagles rank only a couple of spots ahead of them at 29.5 seconds per snap. These stats may be somewhat misleading, however, due to the fact that both teams have a lot of positive game script that has skewed things. At the end of the day, this game's pace is likely to come down to how the up-and-down Cowboys offense is able to perform, as we know the Eagles are a team that is comfortable playing in a variety of situations. If the Cowboys struggle, it could be an ugly game with a slow pace as they become one-dimensional against a ferocious defensive front. However, if the Cowboys are able to push the Eagles at all, then we could be in store for a barn burner with 2 high-profile teams trading blows. The struggles of the Philadelphia secondary against much less talented offenses and quarterbacks certainly point to a situation where the Cowboys should be able to apply some pressure, and, therefore, keep this game interesting and exciting.